Welcome to Padel Smash Academy.
And we are all things paddle.
Well, Ben, welcome to the Padel Smash Academy podcast. We're so excited to have you here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you are the first in the planet paddle-only marketing agency, correct?
I believe so. Yeah, I've done a lot of research and homework, and you're going to now present to me evidence that there's many others. But
All right, Ben. So how did you get into the paddle industry? I mean, do you play paddle? I mean, did you play other racket sports and you saw paddle and you just said, I got to get into this industry? Or how did it work?
Yes. Yeah, it's interesting. So I grew up playing a lot of tennis and squash. Obviously, squash is a big game here in the UK, and I've always kind of continued playing a little bit of both throughout kind of adult life. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, I went out to Dubai, where I used to live, actually. My sister lives, and she one evening said, I'm playing a game of paddle. I'm playing with 4 people, but one guy's dropped out. You've all heard this story before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's had someone that's dropped out and they have to go and fill in. And then, typical story, I fell in love with it straight away. I think playing tennis and squash, it felt quite natural. I've learned a lot about the game since, the waves of offense, defense, and all the different quirks of the sport. And so I played then, and then I came back to the UK. This is probably 3 or 4 years ago, and there were hardly any courts, and that is now changing. So I used to kind of drive about 90 minutes to go and play a game. It was not the closest court, but the closest court where I had friends to play with.
Wow.
And then the segue to working in paddle was last year. I was doing, I'm sure we'll talk about it, but I was doing a contract for the LTA, the tennis governing body here in the UK. And part of my remit was to look after the publicity for the British paddle team around the World Championships, actually back in Dubai. And I was thinking, right, what am I going to do when this contract finishes? And everywhere I turned last year, I sort of met people from paddle, and I felt like it was a bit of a calling to work in the sport. And then the obvious place to start for me was using my career was obviously communications and marketing. And there were a lot of people setting up businesses in paddle, clubs, brands, rackets. And I thought the obvious place for me to fit into the jigsaw puzzle is telling the stories. So the marketing, the communications, the social media. So that was how Padel 22 arrived.
Now, do you prefer playing paddle now versus tennis or squash?
A tough one. Who am I going to annoy by saying? No, look, I grew up playing tennis from a young age, and then I had what a lot of happens with independent sports, right? People play really young, too much, too fast, and I burnt out. Didn't want to pick up a tennis racket for years. My this is by age 11, so talking super young. So I changed my tennis addiction to squash, and then did that throughout my teens. And then kind of, like I said, I played both throughout my adult years. And then when I met paddle, it was like, well, actually, here's something totally different. So to answer your question, look, I enjoy playing paddle because it's a novelty, right? Because I haven't spent my whole childhood growing up with it. So there's so much you can learn, and there's so much that's different, and I'm learning the game. Whereas tennis and squash, of course, you can always learn a bit, but you feel like you know how it works.
Yep.
So I think being an adult and having like what I call a new sport feels quite unique. So that's what's appealing to paddle right now. So I've not really answered your question, have I?
No, give it some time though. Give it another year, you'll say paddle for sure. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, exactly.
So how's the growth? I won't pressure anymore on that subject, but how is the growth of paddle in the UK within the last, let's say, few years?
I think it's there's a lot of talk about it. So there's a lot of people, there's media covering it on TV and writing about it. There's a lot of hype, a lot of interest. There's quite a lot of excitement. A lot of people I talk to and say, hey, this is what I'm doing. I'm working in paddle. They say, oh, I've heard about this. It's supposed to be the new big thing. So definitely the awareness of it is very high, I think, compared to what it was 1-2 years ago. However, what's kind of lagging behind is the number of courts. So there's probably about 350 courts would be my estimation right now. It's predicted to be certainly 400, maybe more by the end of the year.
Wow.
But the graph is going up. So it's been a slow process, but it's quickening up. So the challenges you have here, and probably similar to some of the US, is getting planning permissions, the red tape. Everyone has the great ideas. The entrepreneurs come in and they face these really slow processes with public authorities. So that's what's holding it up. But look, as with all these things, when there's bigger bigger awareness from public authorities, from councils, from local associations, it will be quicker to put through these permits for courts. So that's the biggest challenge right now. The enthusiasm's there. A lot of people wanting to go into business and ignite this industry, but it's finding sites, it's getting the permissions and going through the bureaucracy. And then obviously the challenge is going to be getting mass awareness about a sport. We have 60 million people, 65 million people in the UK. It's a really sport-hungry population. So whilst I think there's lots of people that know about paddle, there's a hell of a lot of people that still never heard of it. So, and that's where hopefully I can do my own part to increase it.
Ben, let me ask you. So, you see the growth there. I mean, what's happening here in the United States? It's a lot of the country clubs, what we call per se. I mean, you have something there. They're taking courts away and they're putting, padel courts, pickleball courts. Is that happening in the UK as well?
Yeah, there's a few different things happening. I'd say the first, the less risk averse option. The less risky option is operators who've gone into tennis clubs, and to be really simple about it, and sort of said, okay, well, a lot of these courts are not being used Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Here's a sport that's on the up. Lots of people talking about it. And the second most popular sport in Spain, big in South America. Why don't we build some paddle courts on your tennis courts? That's a very simple model where people have come in, and obviously to tennis clubs, that's quite appealing if they don't have to pay for the construction. So there's been that happening. Increasingly, I would say more ambitious people are moving away from that, saying actually, because of the climate in the UK, we need to build these things indoor. We want to see high occupancy, so we need these kind of warehouse type structures that you're seeing in Scandinavia, industrial unit type things. And let's build it indoor. It costs more money, but then we can get higher, utilization of courts. We can get people more engaged because they're not currently always looking at the weather forecast. So that you're kind of seeing that model. And then you're also seeing something in between, which is courts under canopies. So they're not indoors, but they have protection at least from vertical rain, not necessarily horizontal rain.
Right.
So look, there's different things happening. And then there's obviously the pay and play model, more transactional. People show up, just want to have a hit. Then there's, I think what will become increasingly popular is the membership model, which obviously is, I understand, kind of buoyant in Miami, and people really want to replace that feel that you used to have in tennis clubs and squash clubs, where people would pay for their memberships, number one, because of the sport, but number two, because they meet lifelong friends there. They meet their partners there. It becomes their home from home. And I think that's what a lot of people will enjoy, is that feeling of like having a community. So look, there's different things happening. There will be the public authority parks where you just pay and show up. But I think the more appealing thing to most people is to have that kind of community feel.
Now, let's talk about cost in the UK. You talked about memberships and the cost per hour. What are you seeing when it comes to the cost?
I'm seeing different things. Obviously, there's premium type offerings. So I'll give you an example. I can't tell you kind of what it costs per hour. They just opened, but there's a great club in London just opened called Padium. Look it up. It's in Canary Wharf, which is kind of the city, our Wall Street, I guess. Opened last week. They had a fantastic opening party. It's prime piece of real estate. They've got an amazing opportunity there to market it amongst the bankers and the corporate crowd and play on that. I imagine that will be maybe more of a premium offering. But then there's other ends of the scale where people can, a bit more, I guess, the pay and play, where it is just, wanting to get people on court quick and fast, not necessarily retaining people through that loyalty of memberships, where it will be a cheaper court usage. To give you an example, I moved house recently. I'm in the south of England, and I joined up to a local club, and they've got 4 outdoor paddle courts. And the court costs between 4 people, we're talking, per hour, probably £15-20, split that between 4 people, £5. I mean, nothing. Wow. But then I'm very aware,
right? That's cheap. That's for the whole hour,
right?
Not per person, right?
No, I mean, so per hour, I think, you're probably talking about £20, roughly, more or less. And then you split that 4 ways. I mean, it's nothing.
Wow. That is cheap.
But look, you have your monthly membership cost on top of that, which is probably, £70-80. So like it's a bit more expensive, but nothing compared to a paddle club in a big city like a New York or a London, where they can charge premiums and people have that income. So look, the scale is going to massively vary. I think the interesting thing will happen when there are so many clubs and facilities for people to choose from. How are those clubs going to retain people, at such high rates? And that's where their offering comes in. Do they have a good bar, a good cafe, a good membership scene, a good event infrastructure?
So that higher end club that you were talking about at the beginning, what would the membership be there, and then what would be the cost per hour? Because the pay by play is relatively very inexpensive compared to Miami or Florida.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I'm afraid I don't have an answer for you on what their rates are. They just opened, and my understanding is they've got a pay and play, but also like a membership structure. Membership, I think, offering you more exclusive access to the courts to book more in advance, and certain kind of privileges. But a lot of people will still do, I guess, the pay and play until they become really familiar with the sport and can, I guess, see it as part of their lifestyle. And maybe, people are busy, right? And they're working lives. So maybe they drop one sport. Maybe they're not playing tennis anymore and they're playing paddle. Maybe they're give up golf, which takes a lot of time, and play paddle. So a lot of people are, I think those in a working life are seeing it as, okay, what do they put their time to outside of work, family, and they're having to maybe give up one sport and take up something else more addictive like paddle.
Yeah, down here in Florida or Miami, we're about $100 to $200 an hour, and then over in New England and New York, we're probably looking at $300 to $400 an hour.
Yeah, you have the reserve at $350 an hour.
Tough.
Then you have the lower end $250 and all that. But Ben, why don't you tell our viewers? Let's talk about Padel 22. Why don't you tell our viewers and listeners what is Padel 22 and what do you do exactly?
What are we doing? Yeah, absolutely. So we are an all-encompassing communications marketing agency, I suppose, is the best way to describe it. So the type of work we're doing, which fits into my background a lot, is traditional PR. So it's working with clients, and they could be clubs, they could be players, paddle players, they could be leagues, they could be tournaments, could be investors. It is essentially to work with them and tell their story of their business in a creative way to ensure they get in media attention. So that could be traditional newspapers, increasingly more it's online outlets, it's radio and TV, it's podcasts, because that's, there's good podcasts out there, and there's people that want to listen in on their morning commute, on their drives. That's, huge vehicle now. And it's working on social media. So it's generating content on Instagram, video, photography content. It's working with influencers. So obviously working with people who maybe are not paddle players, but maybe they're from outside paddle and have a passion for the sport, but they want to be associated with a paddle audience in some way. They've found I'll give you an example. There's someone over here called Katya Jones, who's a big TV personality. She works on as a dancer on Strictly Come Dancing, which is a big BBC show, and she's become really passionate about paddle. So now we're seeing her in all sorts of paddle clubs and doing all sorts of paddle activities. And that's, in a way, we're seeing celebrities coming across to paddle because they've just got this passion for a sport that they've never had a chance to try before. So, yeah, to answer your question, it's different communications channels. We're doing a lot of launches for clubs. So we'll work and, we'll get journalists on court alongside players, influencers, create some noise, create some publicity, and help them really get popular locally so they can get membership and get people on their courts. It's any form of storytelling, really. A lot of written work, and that can be on LinkedIn to the business audience. It can be press release writing, blogs, and there's so many tools in the toolbox these days. I think if I was doing my job 15 years ago, it'd be much more conventional, writing press releases, working with journalists. But now there's so much online through social media and different channels. You have to be quite alert and creative as to how to reach your audiences.
That's fantastic. I mean, so you're pretty much the one-stop shop for everything related to a paddle in the marketing world and social media world.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no one-size-fits-all. Yes, we always want to be working with journalists because there's still a huge influence they can have in terms of telling stories to huge numbers of people, right? But actually, you have to be creative because paddle is still, certainly in the UK, it's seen as, the US as well, seen as a niche sport. So you have to be like, okay, this isn't going to get in the New York Times every day. How can we reach an audience and excite people around this sport, and find channels and outlets that might be interested in covering this? I'll give you an example. So working with fitness and health outlets, paddle is seen as a good health, fitness, a good well-being activity. how can we, work with a journalist who's reporting for those publications and get them on court trying it, seeing what it's like. How is it compared to fitness in tennis or squash or another sport? So it's constantly trying to look at different ways of telling the story, which keeps my job interesting, I guess.
All right. Now, you guys just focus on paddle only, or do you guys do any other sports?
Yeah, at the moment, although I'm getting more interested in pickleball, I have to say.
Oh, no, please.
Is that why you came to California on your last trip?
Tell me about it. No, look, I'm kind of half joking. I came when I was out in California. I knew I was going to had a friend out there who was in Newport Beach, and he said, "You've got to come along and play pickleball." I won't tell you who he is, but he said, I hate pickleball, but there's no paddle courts.
But so that's a good question. So what's happening with pickleball in the UK? I mean, is it happening? Yeah. It's on the radar of anyone, or it's only...
Do you know what? It's not. I mean, it's interesting. There are a few paddle clubs who are thinking, well, actually, there's not a huge cost to constructing pickleball courts. So why don't we create a bit more to our offering and put in some space where maybe we can't fit a paddle court? Why don't we put in a couple of pickleball courts just to give another dimension, another reason for people to come? And if they come and they can't play paddle or they're not interested in paddle, maybe they'll play pickleball. So people are kind of like diversifying and spreading their risk, I guess. I say that's a few people I've heard of doing that. Most who are doing paddle are just saying, we're only going to construct paddle. Awareness of pickleball is pretty low. I'd say the only awareness we have, generally speaking, is when we hear about how big it is in America.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's the end of the story. I do think pickleball's got a good story to tell, and I think it is appealing to people, clearly of different ages and different backgrounds. And I think it will have a popularity here, and I think it will grow.
So let's talk now about the big paddle elephant in the room. So Padel 22 and Racket X. Why don't you give us an intro, because that's how I get to know you and
Yeah.
So let's talk about your involvement in Padel 22 and Racket X.
Yeah, was really obviously delighted to be working with Robin and the team. I think the interesting thing about, a lot of work we've been doing has been with paddle operators and clubs, because that's the obvious, they want to get awareness for their members and players on court. But actually Racket X is a really interesting one, because it's all racket sports, right? And it's, I suppose, what we're calling the big three of, in no particular order, tennis, paddle, and pickleball. I think it's a great idea. I love the story behind it. I love the story Robin and Mark are, creative with this idea that racket sports are doing pretty well, and why don't we celebrate this? Tennis participation is doing very well in America, very well on this side of the Atlantic as well. Pickleball we know about in the States, paddle we know about across the rest of the world, and it's a little bit paddle and pickleball, the ships crossing in the night, right? Paddle is coming to the States, we can all see that, and pickleball I think is coming to other parts of the world. So there's a great story to be told. Even squash, I've heard squash participation is good in the US, and that's in contrast to many countries where it's on the decline. So there's some great stuff happening in racket sports, and I think to bring everyone, not everyone, but a lot of people in racket sports have worked in their own silos and their own bubbles, right? Because there's a bit of competitiveness. Even within sports, you see tennis, there's different governing bodies, there's different associations. To actually get all in a room together and say, actually, let's share, let's learn from each other, let's see how we can do stuff different ways. None of us is perfect at how we've worked and how our sports have grown. So let's learn off each other, and we don't need to be threatened. Pickleball and paddle and tennis, in my view, can grow, can all grow and benefit. It doesn't need to be to the detriment of one or the other. So I think I love the narrative behind it. I think it's going to have a great collection of different stakeholders, investors, players, hopefully, clubs, manufacturers, coaches, constructors. There's so many different parts of the industry. And I'm, really looking forward to seeing it and seeing everyone and coming to Miami for the first time.
Fantastic. I'm really looking forward when I saw you that you were part of the team. I really got excited because, you're all into paddle and the social media and all that. So you can bring so much value to Racket X and the entire team. So I really appreciate it.
Good to hear. No, it's going to be a great event, and it's I can clearly absolutely see it's going to go on to fantastic things in the years ahead, because these sports are here. The new sports are here to stay, and I think there hasn't been anything like this, has there?
No,
there hasn't been, in my view, these racket sports coming together in one room, and actually, why not? Because surely everyone can benefit from that. I think it's going to be a great experience. It's the right time to have it. with the Miami Open.
Yeah.
Also, it positions Miami so well as this racket sports, particularly tennis, but racket sports hub, right? With paddle now booming. So it feels like a logical place to have it.
So give us a quick review of what RacketX is, and so we get excited to all our viewers and listeners.
Yeah, I think the best way I can describe it is essentially a celebration of how well racket sports are doing. Like I say, tennis, if you look at all the statistics, tennis is doing really well. I'm sure helped by the pandemic, but that's, it's a great thing. People got together and could play a sport like tennis. I think, the fact tennis is doing well in the US, more people playing it than before. Same in the UK and other European countries. I think it is, it's a celebration of these sports doing well. It's to send a message that actually, to use the analogy, a rising tide lifts all boats, we're saying in English, but it's everyone can win from this. I think it's going to be getting people together and also getting people thinking laterally. So I don't think sport has always done the best job at working with tech and working with different industries to broaden its audience. I think sport does quite a good job at speaking to itself and just thinking it will retain fans and players, but actually, particularly now with new technologies and what kids are doing with games, etc., you need to not be complacent to grow your sport and get new fans for the future. So you've got to how can the racket sports be working with the Googles and the Instagrams and the social media firms to grow their audience and learn and sort of adapt, I suppose. So I think it's about being thought-provoking. It's about challenging. It's going to be about getting people in a room talking together, not being threatened by each other. It's going to be about moving together as a sector, because I think racket sports should actually be a collective sector rather than at competition with each other. I don't think that helps.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Where's it going to be and what the dates? Give us for the RacketX exploding right here.
RacketX is going to be in Miami in 24th to 26th of March 2024. So coming around quickly. We've just announced the first 3 speakers, which is great. So we've got on the paddle front, I should start with, we've got Marcos Del Pilar, who you guys will know is a real pioneer for the sport in the States and a friend of mine. And we have Katrina Adams on the tennis side, former USTA CEO, big figure. And also we've got Thomas Shields on the pickleball side from the Dink. So I'm learning about these pickleball media, and he's obviously doing a great job spreading the word of pickleball. So that's the start. I think we've got some big names to come. Really excited about who's going to be in the room and what it's going to be like.
So let me ask you, is Sandy coming over the pond?
Is Sandy coming over?
Yeah.
I don't want to break any news here.
No, come on, man.
Come on. I know. I'll have a word. We'd love Sandy to come over. He's fantastic. He's doing wonders for the sport. I love what they're doing. They've done a fantastic job so far, and they're accelerating the sport's growth to all these new markets. Hands down, they've done a fantastic job at growing it, and hugely popular. So we'd love to see them in Miami.
Yeah, that'll be great, man. I'm sure you're coming, right?
I hope I'm coming. Yeah,
you better, man. Don't forget your bathing suit and your, suntan lotion.
I'm gonna do some work, man.
Quick question, Ben. I got. Do you guys represent any players?
Yeah, so we're actually working logically, because it's home. We've started with British players. I'd like to do some work with for any Americans listening, with some American players, because I'm doing a lot of work in the States, and I'm I should share this. I'm sure that's obvious, but I'm very passionate about paddle's growth in the US, because I think it's very early stage, but it's going to be huge. So in the UK, we're working with Tia Norton on the women's side, doing some work with Sam Jones on the men's side. He's been number 2. And the American players, I think, we'd love to be doing some more, because they've got stories to tell.
Yeah, so we interview a lot of players, the top 10 players here, and they're always looking for sponsors. They're always looking for something to give them more exposure. So can you talk to them a little bit what you actually do? What could you do for them?
Absolutely. And the two go hand in hand. So look, we're very aware the state of the sport in countries like the US and the UK is that these players want sponsorship. They want to tell their stories. They're passionate about the sport's growth. And you don't see that in a lot of the established sports. They'll have many agents. They'll have many, they'll be quite selfish about their playing careers, I would say. But actually in paddle, the great thing is you're seeing players who really, yes, they're passionate about their playing, but they're also passionate about seeing the sport grow and grow. And that's like this underlying desire they have to be like, I suppose, champions of its success. So what we do is we work with those players to grow their profile, and that can be done through Instagram. So we'll work, we'll at a very practical level, we'll say to a player like Sam, we'll say, right, you need to be, have your iPhone at the side of the court. You need a tripod. You need to film yourself playing. send it to us. We'll package it up, make it look really good. We'll create your own brand from it, and we will, present it on social media, on Instagram. Make sure you're engaging with different. Make sure sponsors are seeing you, making sure the right audiences are seeing you, helping you grow your brand that way. And then similarly, we'll work at media relations. So we'll try and tell a story for someone like Sam to different media outlets. What's his story? Where in the UK is he from? Who's he representing? What's his background? He lived in Dubai for a while, so an obvious market is to speak to Dubai media about him and tell the story of why he went to live there to develop his paddle. So yeah, it's social media engagement, it's media relations, it's creating content for them, video, photography where we can. And yeah, it's also doing their writing on the sort of the more business corporate side. So I think LinkedIn is a platform that's huge for paddle, because it's where a lot of the paddle industry is meeting, getting to know each other when they can't be there in the same room. So it's how can they present themselves in the best way to sponsors, so they look professional, so they're not business people, but they still need to appear as a brand, as a business, because they've got to be marketable. So how can they present themselves on LinkedIn and show that they are, as well as they're doing on the court, they're really presentable, serious kind of brands themselves off the court.
And
different ways.
Yeah, is there different tiers when it comes to cost? And what would a player expect to pay for something like that yearly?
Yeah. Okay. So typically it would work. We'd say to a player, like, we're not gonna say you're gonna have a 1 month success. We can do obviously stuff in the short term, but actually it's about a growth. So we'll work with them on, say, like a monthly retainer basis. And that can be, it will come down to how much time we put to it essentially, but we'll have certain deliverables, things we're trying to achieve for them. So we might say, okay, what we're going to try and do is secure you attention in X or Y media outlets. And we'll try and get stories or interviews for them in those outlets, or podcast appearances, for example. Or we might say, right, we're going to raise your Instagram audience by X%. I'm not going to say what number, it depends what they're at, but, or we're going to try and, we can't promise them sponsors, but what we can promise them is more attention. We'll give them more visibility to sponsors to start those conversations. So it's a door opener, essentially. And it's a stepping stone to them getting the sponsorship discussions, securing sponsors, having a, more comfortable life. So they're not only relying on prize money. It's a process, and it's part of the process we want to work on because we're passionate about it.
So are the players come down here, and most of the players that they're not in the finals, semifinals, or quarterfinals of the World Paddle Tour Premier, they're kind of starving artists. They're trying to get to make a living out playing paddle, but they usually they're doing something else. What can they expect to, and what you're doing is great, because at the end of the day, they're looking for a sponsor, right? And sponsors want somebody that looks credible and professional, and that's something that you can provide for them, and there's value there. So what investment would they have to make, do you think, on a monthly basis, just to get our players a good idea of what they need to invest in?
Yeah, definitely. It's all, it all depends how much budget they have, I guess, essentially, as to how much we can help them. But look, I'll give you an idea of, players generally. We might say, okay, well, we'll put in X number of days a month, and, $1,000, for example, and we can support you across Instagram. We can support you across pitching you to media, getting you introduced to journalists, getting interviewed, and hopefully getting stories published. And then we can do your writing as well. So we'll write your LinkedIn posts, because you don't have time for that, or you might not be an expert writer. And we'll help you build the connections on LinkedIn as well. So hopefully they get more seen by the right people. They get seen by companies, by business people that suddenly are interested in them, because separate to that, they're hearing about this amazing sport of paddle. And if they're seeing a player, they're thinking, hang on, this is a good way maybe for our business to tell our story. Yeah. So, so look, as with all these things, it depends how much time you want to invest to it. But we're very aware players do not have the deep pockets of big companies. Mm-hmm. So we'll say, I would say, like $1,000 to a player will get them a certain amount of time a month that we will really try and up their audiences and up their profile.
So they should expect to spend about $12,000 a year in marketing themselves, and hopefully they can help them expose them to sponsors and move them up in their career.
Yeah, and look, we want to work with. ultimately we want to work with players and our ultimate ambition, obviously, apart from the day job, is actually just to grow the profile of the sport. And if we can work with players, we're really keen to do that. So if players, have the challenges and they're like, I see the value in this, but I can't afford that amount per month. It's like, well, let's have a discussion. Obviously, then, the result is like we can't put as much time to it per month. That's just obviously business sense. But the main thing is we have the will to make it work. We want to see them grow in their career. They have to do the stuff on the court, but if we can help off, then that makes us happy.
Fantastic.
Right.
Yeah. So how can they get in touch with you? Through your website?
Yeah, sure. So website is padel22 padel-22.com, I should say. My email, ben@padel-22.com. And then on Instagram is a great place to follow us. So Padel22 Global, all one word. I have my own personal page as well, the Padel PR. And then I'm on LinkedIn, pretty active on there as well. So there's a number of ways, and hopefully you'll see them in the show notes.
Perfect. We're gonna put all those notes on the notes and
Definitely.
for anyone to reach out to you.
Look, I think this is great. I think, I think it's an interesting topic. I think is in which parts of the US the game is going to grow fastest. Obviously, we know Florida, Miami. We can see what's happening a little bit now in California with Tactica and New York, Paddle House and Reserve and others. But I think it's going to be interesting to see which parts of the country it starts. It's like the heat map, right? To see where the game grows. Maybe that's a whole other discussion, but it's I'll be interested to know how fast it is, and to know what you guys think in terms of what pockets, which cities it's going to be growing in.
It's Florida, man. I mean, it's really growing here. Of course, it's gonna once there's a model when it comes to let's say New England, because you're dealing with the snow and the rain and different seasons.
Yeah.
Once there's this type of like model there, then everybody copy it and it'll just keep growing as well. But really, it's here in Florida. I mean, it's grown like tremendous in the last 2-3 years. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah. So the big question from someone from the UK: when is Andy Murray gonna make the jump into paddle?
I know, we're all waiting, right? Well, he's involved in one of the companies here. You're aware, Game for Paddle, but I know. We all wonder. I think we're seeing it in pickleball, right? So Eugenie Bouchard, I think, made the move. Was it yesterday or a few days ago?
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of other big names investing in pickleball. I think it's a matter of time. We're definitely seeing, there's definitely interest from tennis players or like ex-tennis players who are getting involved. There's interest from a lot of football or soccer players, and other kind of sports, like rugby, cricket, some of the British sports. We're seeing ex-players come into paddle because it keeps their competitive juices flowing. Yeah. It's not as, how would I put it? It's not as going to take as long to get to a decent standard as a tennis or golf if you're starting for the first time. The technical abilities hopefully are quicker to pick up. So definitely seeing more athletes from other sports playing it. I haven't answered your Andy Murray. That's an impossible question, right?
So one final question, and I know you guys are avid rugby players and all that. I'm from Argentina. We follow rugby pretty well. Sadly, you guys are kicking our asses in the first game of the World Cup. But I don't know if you've seen the game or not, but it was pretty tough for us to swallow that pill.
Yeah, I know. No, look, I mean, actually, just on the rugby, I think it's hats off to Argentina over the years. It's you guys have come it's super competitive these days. I mean, to be honest, like 20 years ago, if I was watching England Argentina play, I'd be like, well, this should be a win for England. But actually now it's so much more competitive, and actually that makes the sport better, right? So. Take aside your the patriotism of wanting your home country to win. Actually, now it's a much more global game. Yeah, and there's many more countries that can actually give the old countries a good run for their money. So it's a much more interesting proposition than it was, right?
What I'm very, very happy is Argentina is much better at paddle than in the UK. So
maybe you guys could give us a bit of a chance. Yeah, it's culturally you guys are so far ahead. That's going to take time. That is an interesting topic, actually. It's going to be, when will the world rankings, how many years or maybe it's decades away before we see the multiple flags appear? Yeah. And that doesn't happen overnight, right? It's, we need to see it develop as an Olympic sport. We need to see infrastructure in all these countries so it becomes the norm for kids to grow up playing paddle.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know how old I'm going to be when that happens. But
well, one of the major issues that we have here in the United States is that they need to start investing money on the junior paddles. You know what I mean? Start growing the sport from the bottom up, and that's one of the things that we're lacking right now. I'm part of the USPA competition committee, and now we got to send the kids to the World Cup of paddle for juniors, and we don't have enough in the entire country. We don't have enough juniors for us to send them to compete.
Yeah, I mean, so this is an interesting area actually, because I think a lot of people, a lot of businesses will go into paddle similar in the UK and US, and they'll just think, right, let's build the courts. That's where the money can be made. That's how we're going to generate return on investment, etc. Fair enough, great. That's the obvious business decision, apart from maybe building a paddle racket brand or clothing, etc. But actually, for the good of the game, who's developing the infrastructure that when all these courts are built? Where is it going to be in schools? Where's it going to be in universities, colleges? Who's developing the whole piece of the puzzle that has to happen alongside? You can have courts, but if there's no one that's taking care of, the pathway programs and stuff, then you're going to have a very strange landscape in 10, 20 years. I don't think that's going to be the case. I could see amazing job, Ryan and the guys at Tactica, they're fully focused on that development piece. So there are, that is kind of underway. But that's going to take a long time, right? To get into all the colleges and get into the schools and to make it a mainstream sport. So I think any country that's taking on paddle, like a UK or US, you need people devoted to that side of the obviously the USPA, is very involved in that, but you need lots of pairs of hands to generate that, because it takes a long time. So you don't want to forget about that, whichever country you are.
Yeah, for sure. Excellent. Well, what a great pleasure having you here. I know you have to run. You have a meeting quickly.
Well, no, look, this was a lot of fun. Thanks for having me on. And I'm passionate about the growth of the game. Obviously in Florida, seeing you guys lead the way, but I'm glad to see it spreading its wings now. I'm glad to see the PPL taking shape and some of the players now, generate interest, and people are turning their heads, which is good.
Fantastic, man. We're looking forward to see you in March 24th at the Racket Expo right here at the Miami Beach Convention Center. Let's rock it, baby. Let's take paddle to the next level.
All right, Ben.
Guys.
Thank you for coming on the show, and we wish you all the luck. Okay.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, guys.
All the best.
Have a good one.
Bye.
See you.
Bye.
Guys, if you haven't already, make sure that you hit that subscribe button and turn on your notifications.
And remember, it's free $99. It doesn't cost you anything to hit that subscribe button.
Thanks for tuning in to Padel Smash Academy. We hope you'll find our videos informative, helpful in improving your game and learning all things paddle.
So until next time, keep improving your game. And remember, learn, play, and share.